The following is a special presentation of Tony Kurre Radio. Want the real story behind the sound bites and headlines? Let's find the facts. Remember, it's not a conspiracy theory if it's the truth. You are not paranoid or confused. You just need to know.
Hello, everybody. It's time for another edition of Everything You Need to Know. I'm Kip Keefer. Delighted to have all of you on board. Look forward every week to having this opportunity to visit. And this week, we're going to take a little bit of a detour from, I've gotten a lot of nice feedback. A lot of people have responded telling me that some of the information that we convey here are things that they either didn't know or don't realize, have been talking a lot about. And again, I always preface every show with the statement that I don't look at myself as some kind of partisan spokesperson reading from the hymnal of everybody else. I look at things individually from a unique perspective and form my own opinions. I'm not a member of any party. I'm not affiliated with any particular ideology. My approach is always think for myself, and I hope that that conveys on these shows. But with all that being said, I had a birthday at the end of last week, and, I didn't approach it with all the enthusiasm that I probably should have or maybe would have in younger years, but had such an outpouring of wonderful well wishes and messages and compliments, and also just a wonderful day with my youngest son, who came and installed a bunch of gadgets here to make my life advance about a half a century in terms of progress and get away from being totally old school to sort of peeking at modern technology and all the things that are available. And I just have had just a great perspective since then of just how blessed and lucky I am. And I wanted to talk some about that, and hopefully I will once again present some kind of thought or idea that maybe will inspire you to have similar thoughts along those lines. I think it's funny that, as we visit here, I'm proud of a variety of different broadcast initiatives and things that I have been allowed to do in my career. But one of my great achievements, I guess you can say, was finally making myself sit down a couple of years ago. It was right after Christmas. I got inspired. I had been collecting some bits and pieces of different things for years. And I actually published a book in 2016, and it's called "What Does George Clooney Have That I Ain't Got?" And it's a picture, spared no expense, got a photo shoot done on a red carpet with the big velvet ropes and me in a tuxedo. And of course, there's nobody else around. I'm standing there all by myself with my arms outstretched and a quizzical look on my face, like, where's all my hoopla and fanfare? But the book is, I think, a good achievement, and it's pretty much what I set out to do. For years and years, with my friends at golf trips and other gatherings for holidays and parties and weddings and all that, I'm always kind of put on stage by my friends urging me to tell others that don't have as direct contact on a regular basis what they lovingly refer to as, quote, Keefer stories. Now, Keefer stories are a wide-ranging collection of mostly mishaps or interesting situations I've gotten myself in during the course of my lifetime. And those are all featured in the book. But despite them always urging me, you got to write a book, dude. You got to put all this stuff into a book. And I always, was intrigued by the idea, but I hesitated because I did not want to just write a book about all of my mishaps and misadventures. And there's some good stories. I'm going to relate one of them to you here in a moment in there that they always make me tell. But then I kind of had an epiphany that holiday season, and I said, I have so much perspective having raised two sons and being involved in a lot of different endeavors and things in my professional career, and just perspectives on a lot of life. That I finally decided that I would write a bit of an autobiography, and then in between chapters in kind of a chronological order, just to put in, and I was going to, chapter 1, chapter 2, but then between chapter 2 and 3, there's a heading, and it's a Keefer story. And I came up with a title for all those, and I interspersed the 6 or 8 most popular Keefer stories throughout the book, again, kind of in a chronological order, along with sort of my life story. Now, I was on an airplane on my way, ironically, to Atlanta for a book signing that turned out to be a phenomenal success, since that was my home territory, and was flying over there from out in Tucson, Arizona. And I sat between a gentleman on the aisle and, unfortunately, the worst nightmare scenario when you fly. I was in a middle seat, which is I avoid at all costs because it's so uncomfortable. But a nice lady sitting on the window, and she and I got to chatting a little bit. And I mentioned I was on my way to a book signing, and we got to talking about that. And this guy was kind of let's just call him what he was, kind of a jerk sitting next to me. And he says, "Well, so you've written a book about yourself. Who are you?" And I said, "I'm Kip Keefer." And he said, "Well, how come I've never heard of you?" And I said, "Well, maybe if you read the book, you will have." Anyway, I ran into that kind of attitude a little bit of, why would you write a book about your life story when you're not a very notable character? But I think I found the right formula in that book to talk about, family and faith and life and just the twists and turns it takes. So it's available on Amazon. This is not an infomercial to sell books. But what does George Clooney have that I ain't got by Kip Keefer is a proud accomplishment of mine that I actually sat down in just about 6 weeks and cranked that out, and 480 pages that a lot of people have given me great feedback. Early on, my friend Joe Lippum in Atlanta was looking at a list of notable individuals that had written books, and he said, "Okay, here's a book written about 20 years ago by Nancy Pelosi, and it looks like she only sold 2,700 copies of that particular book. So that's your goal." And I said, "Oh, if I don't make that, then this is an absolute failure." Well, I'm proud to report that I have exceeded the Nancy Pelosi total, but unfortunately fallen well short of my goal, which was to sell enough copies to finance my beach house, which, if it was in southwestern Florida, that would not have been a good idea based on recent events, and still praying for a quick recovery for a lot of those folks who were devastated by Hurricane Ian. But I did fall short of that goal, but the experience all in all was something very special, and I'm really proud to report that I am a published author. The Keefer story I'll tell you in that book was at a formative time, to say the least. I had just turned 18 years old. I had attended my freshman year at college at Memphis. I was still living in Atlanta, of course, and all my friends were there. I'd gone home for the summer, and it was a huge deal at the time The U.S. Open Golf Championship was coming to Atlanta. It's the first time the U.S. Open in the 100 and some odd years that they'd been conducting a championship had ever come south of the Mason-Dixon line. It was the first one ever in the South. And as a young man and an avid golfer and just a gigantic sports fan, which I remain to this day, I really wanted to be on hand to witness that event. But at that age of 18 years old and in that summer, I didn't have two nickels to rub together. I think my only means of income that summer was umpiring baseball games and maybe working in the score booth at the Little League field where I had played as a young man. So I got the idea. I saw an ad. This was back in the days when the classified ads in the Sunday paper were just jam-packed with all kinds of things for sale and job opportunities. There was a big display ad from the security company that had been hired and contracted to conduct, all the operations at the golf tournament. And I followed the information and went down on Monday morning to the offices of this security company and filled out an application. And lo and behold, just 3 days later, got a call and was told when to report for orientation about a week before the tournament. So I am issued a kind of a golf shirt for some assignments. And there's also, if you get another gig more on the golf course, they had this kind of light red blazer and this goofy hat. But unfortunately, they didn't realize, that I was executive material at that time. I was initially assigned a parking lot far, far away from the tournament where people would park their cars and be put on buses and taken to the golf course. So for the first couple of days, that was my assignment, and it was really defeating the whole purpose of not being on the golf course where I wanted to be. Now, I still had access because when I checked in, that was actually on the course. So when you went to clock out, you rode a bus at the end of your shift. Long and short of the story was about the third day, I was given an upgrade and assignment, and I actually had to wear the red jacket and the hat because when I showed up, they said, you've been doing a good job, so we're going to put you in a little bit better spot today. We need you to guard the ABC broadcast tower that's just off the 12th or 13th hole and, guard it. I just standing there, I guess, as a deterrent to anybody who had thoughts of before the telecasts of climbing up there and messing with things. But that was a lot better because it put me, basically on the golf course. The very last day on Sunday when I showed up, they said, we've got a more important spot for you today. And they take me out to a parking area that's adjacent right to the golf course. And it was the official ABC television parking lot for the event. And in that lot, only people with a big green ABC access sticker on their windshield were the only vehicles allowed in that lot. And it was impressed upon me that absolutely positively no one could be able to be allowed to park there unless they had that sticker. So for the first couple hours, I was Joe efficiency. Anybody who would pull in, hey, can I park here? I said, no, sir, I'm sorry. You don't have a green ABC access sticker. You're going to have to back up and go find parking elsewhere. And I would give them directions of where to go. And I was a stickler and was really in charge. I had a supervisor come by and tell me what a great job I was doing. About mid-morning, the heavens opened up. We had a gully washing big thunderstorm. And right about that time, a big Lincoln Continental pulled in. And the window came down from the back, and a gentleman said, "You're getting drenched. You want to hop in here for a minute and wait this thing out?" And I knew the voice was familiar, and I realized as soon as I was getting in the car, this was a guy driving Jim McKay to the tournament. Jim McKay, of course, was the voice of ABC Sports for just so many years, one of the most iconic sports broadcasters of all times. And here I was, a young man who was in broadcast journalism, was just aspiring to be Jim McKay someday. And he allows me to sit in the back of it wasn't a limo, but it was a big town car, and wait out a storm with him. And we had the most amazing conversation. He showed so much interest in me and my career goals. And it was like a surreal experience. It was absolutely remarkable to be sitting there with Jim McKay. Of course, Jim McKay most famously and most tragically became known in his broadcast career for the 1972 Munich Olympics, when he was cast in as a sports broadcaster to anchoring one of the most harrowing stories in the history of mankind, in my opinion, when Palestinian terrorists stormed the compound at the Olympics and took all those Israeli athletes hostage, and that played out over about a 10 or 12-hour period until it tragically ended at the Munich airport with an attack that was ill-advised, let's put it that way, that resulted in the death of the terrorists, but also in the demise of 11 Israeli athletes when their helicopter that they were supposed to be leaving on with the terrorists was exploded either by the terrorists or by the German assault team. That's still a raging controversy. The bottom line is Jim McKay anchored that coverage all day long, and famously declared at the end, when the terrible news had come from the airport that all of the Israeli athletes had been killed, he famously and simply declared words that will go down in television history. He said, "So 11 athletes tragically killed at the airport," and he looked at the camera with tears welling up at his eyes, and he said, "They're all gone." Just television history of such a staggering amount of importance. But so I'm sitting here talking to Jim McKay, and it was great. And the weather was letting up a little bit. He goes, "Okay, well, I got to get in. I've enjoyed our visit." And I told him how much I thanked him. And it's something that's always been just in my memory that, and again, I have not had anywhere near as notable a career as Jim McKay. But to this day, if any young person wants to engage me in any kind of conversation about their goals and things they want to do in their career and things that I have some expertise in, that made a huge impression. And I'm always anxious to visit with anybody who wants to have a conversation. So I get back in by post, and by that time, the golf tournament's going on pretty hot and heavy. It's getting to be like 1 o'clock. All of a sudden, this gigantic, right out of the movies, Cadillac pulls in. And that was back in the day when license plates on both sides of the car, front and back. I distinctly remember seeing this big white Cadillac that was just huge, pulling into that drive, and a Texas license plate on the front. And this guy with electric windows, and back then that was not a common thing. He uses power windows and rolls it down and said, "Hey, partner, can I park here?" And I said, "I'm sorry, sir. I'd love to let you, but you've got to have a green ABC sticker to get in this lot." And he goes, "Oh, okay. Let me see." And he fumbles around for a minute, and he holds up a $50 bill. And he said, "Is this green enough?" And I looked to my right and I looked to my left. I knew I only had 2 hours left in my shift. And I said, sir, that is green enough. Go right on ahead. So I took the $50 and he parked his car. And for the next 2 hours, Mr. On the job integrity security guard, you could make me any offer. And by that time, with hardly anybody coming in and nobody paying attention anymore, Kip Keefer became a cottage industry at the end of his shift at the U.S. Open. I was taking $5, $10, whatever. And, I think at that time, minimum wage was only something like $3.85. I know that seems hard to believe, and this isn't like in the 1940s. So at the end of the day, I had a pocket full of money, and I went and clocked out and put on my civilian clothes, still had my credential. So I went on the course and watched the action unfolding down the stretch. A young unknown golfer named Jerry Pate, who was from the University of Alabama, got to the 18th hole with a one-shot lead. Instead of laying up on the par 5, he had a big drive, and he had about 225 or 230 to the green over water. He executed one of the gutsiest shots I've ever seen in sports when he hit a 4-iron, and I was standing about 30 feet away and witnessed the event. He hit the 4-iron right on the screws, right over the water, onto the green, and executed a 2-putt to wrap up the U.S. Open. Sports Illustrated that next week had his picture from that same scene. Unfortunately, I didn't make the photo, but the headline was, "You were great, Jerry Pate." And I'll never forget that. So at the end of the day, my shift, where I was making probably $4.25 an hour for being on duty, because the floodgates opened, that gentleman from Texas, inspired too by the success and graciousness of Jim McKay, I wound up with a pocket full of about $200, which for me in those days, I felt like Jed Clampett. Now, the first thing you know, old Kip's a millionaire. It was an extraordinary day, and I tell it in great detail in the book. So that's one of the Keefer stories that is always requested. That's Green Enough is, of course, the name of that particular story. The other part of the book I wanted to talk about, and again, this is kind of a result of me being reflective and a little whimsical after the birthday week, but I wanted to talk about a chapter in there that was called A Wink and a Nod, because it's about my firstborn son, Case Keefer, who, if anyone is following things going on here on TKR, I'm doing a show right now with Case Keefer, who is the sports editor of the Las Vegas Sun. It's called Wanna Bet. And Case has grown up to be an exemplary young man and a very accomplished journalist, and has been given great opportunities at an early age that he has absolutely earned. And his stock is rising fast in the sports writing and broadcasting world. But the story that I wrote about was really kind of inspired by the twists and turns that life takes that send things in a negative direction. I have had a lot of opportunities and a lot of accomplishments, but maybe the one that I'm most proud of is the fact that when my son was born, the first time I looked at him, I had this powerful feeling of resolve that this is an absolute miracle, and I am not going to do what my dad did and so many of my friends' dads did, and not embrace every possible second of this experience. And I'm proud of the fact that I had, at a relatively young age, the perspective to have that kind of again, the best word is resolve. And I'm proud to say that every moment of Case's childhood, and for a man, there's no relationship in your life that's ever going to be as special as that bond you have with your firstborn son. You are his hero. You are his role model. That he literally believes you hung the moon, and you are so full of adoration and absolute gratitude to have that little guy in your life that's hanging on your every word and wants to be just like you. It's just a special thing that I'm really proud of the fact that I recognized that while it was happening. And I don't really look back at that as a memory at this time. For me, it's more of a recollection of just a dream daily coming true. Just a fantastic experience. I got to give credit to the great singer, songwriter, and balladeer from that era, Harry Chapin, who wrote the classic song Cats in the Cradle. I'm sure everybody's familiar with that, despite the fact that it was recorded way back in the 70s. But Harry said it best in that song and really set the tone for sort of that attitude. I'm not going to give him full credit, but if you recall in Cats in the Cradle, the song is about a guy who has a first son, but has so much going on that he doesn't really embrace the opportunity to be with his kid. And next thing you know, he reaches the point of old age and retirement. And the boy throughout the song says, I'm going to be like you, Dad. I'm going to be like you. And at the end, he comes to realize in that last verse that's really heart-wrenching. You probably didn't pay any extra for this, but I'm going to kind of a cappella sing you the last verse to put all what I'm saying in perspective. Remember, Harry sings, well, I called him up just the other day. I said, I'd like to see you if you don't mind. He said, I'd love to, Dad, if I could find the time. But the new job's a hassle and the kids have the flu. But it's sure nice talking to you, Dad. It's been sure nice talking to you. And when I hung up the phone, it occurred to me, he'd grown up just like me. My boy was just like me. And the cats in the cradle and the silver spoon, the little boy grew like the man in the moon. When you coming home, son? I don't know when. We'll get together then, Dad. We're going to have a good time then. Okay, I just recited it. I didn't sing it, but I hope the impact was there of just what I'm talking about. So Case, all through his childhood, is just the ultimate kid. He's a hard worker. He's fun. He has a lot of interests, and our bond, of course, was sports. And coached a lot of his teams when he was growing up, and when he got into the middle school and high school age, he was excelling on the football field. I'll tell you a quick story. His first day at practice when we had moved to Alabama, he was 8 years old, and he was playing football for the first time out in Clay. A great group of guys. David Nichols was the coach. Jim Dunn, who's a prominent guy here in Birmingham, was the league director. Just a great bunch of people. And the very first practice, they didn't know him. We were brand new in town. I kind of pulled him aside right before he went out to the practice field, and I said, look, the first thing they're going to do is ask you to run a lap. And there is nothing you could do to make yourself known and to announce your presence here as a factor, then, a lot of the kids just going to kind of run half speed or not even, it's just an exercise in just what you do in football practice. I said, if you want to get noticed and you want to get the coaches right away on their radar, I said, you can run about 3/4 of the race at regular speed. But then right when you turn for that last straightaway, kick it in and run as fast as you can. I mean, just pour it on, and that will get their attention faster than anything else. And, some kids might have just shrugged that off or whatever. Yeah, right, I'm not going to run hard. My son, Case Keefer, was hanging around to the top of the pack and he's a big boy with the running backs and the little fast guys. And when they came in the last 100 yards, he kicked it in like crazy and end up in stride for stride with the coach's son, Colby Nichols, which was a little guy who was really fast. And they finished stride for stride about 20 yards ahead of the rest of the next group of kids. And the coaches immediately, you could just see their reaction. They said, come over here, Case Keefer. Wow, that was great. See, that's the kind of effort we need from all of you guys. And he established himself from minute one. And it was a great thing to see. So as his high school career began, he was in the 9th grade at Wichita Collegiate School. My wife and I started having some problems. That is, a story for another day. But it resulted in a separation, basically, with a pending divorce. And it was devastating because, a big reason we had problems was because we put so much emphasis on our children. We really didn't pay enough attention to our own relationship. And that had some tragic results. Anyway, I had been offered a job in Arizona and took it because one of the problems we were having in Wichita was I had lost the great job that we had moved there for. So I went to Arizona, was separated from my kids for the first time in my life, and I hated every minute of it. Case was in 9th grade, and it was like junior varsity that he was playing, but he was distinguishing himself. And I got back and saw, I think they only had 5 games. I think I saw 3 of the 5, but I got a phone call, and I got to hurry up because we're running short on time here. I got a phone call from him right before when that season was over. Only 2 9th graders had been asked or honored to be asked to dress out for the varsity's playoff game that was coming up that next week, and Case was one of them. And it was such a big deal. There was no way he was going to play. It was just an honor for the kids that had given the best effort and were future prospects, that they let them dress for the game. But it was a state playoff game, and it was a big deal. And I had a commitment in Phoenix. I had to appear at a racing commission meeting there on the same morning of the game. I have to kind of cut this down, but found a flight that went to Oklahoma City. I couldn't get to Wichita and still make the game. I flew to Oklahoma City. I jumped in a rental car and exceeded every speed limit, and actually miraculously, against all odds, got there just as the team was coming out of the tunnel to run onto the field. And I sprinted to get up into the area so I could see Case in that moment, because what a big deal. You're suited up in 9th grade for a varsity playoff game. And it was just a mass of kids. I didn't know what number they had given him. It was just looking at a group of kids, and all of a sudden, as if with heavenly intervention, he turned his head and saw me stand there. He had no idea I was even coming. This was something I decided pretty much at the last minute, and he saw me. We made eye contact. It was a moment that was a fleeting second that is burned in my memory like it was the ultimate experience, because the connection was just unbelievable. And, he was being Joe Pro and didn't wave or even really make much of a move. But with our eyes locked, he kind of just gave a subtle nod, and I did the same. And that's why the chapter is called Wink and a Nod, because the fact that I was there to see and share that with him after everything we have done, it was the ultimate rite of passage, his first step really into this great career. And, exemplary person that he's become. And it's such a moment that I cherish. And with all of the emotion of trying to get there and actually making it and having that experience, and the enormity of my marriage ending and life changing for all of us, I'm not ashamed to admit that I walked off where nobody could see me, and I literally wept. Just the biggest outpouring emotion in my entire life. So that's some of the things that are in the book. That again, it makes it a source of pride for me that I was able to record a lot of that for posterity, even if it was not a great commercial success, and I am not living on the beach. Those were the thoughts I had today. I hope you all will indulge my departure from the norm, but just some things that were on my mind and some things that maybe you didn't need to know, but things I wanted you to know. Have a great week, everybody. We'll be back again on TKR, and looking forward to, as always, visiting with all of you. Thanks really for all of your support on the show. We'll be back next week. I'm Kip Keefer. Have a great couple of days, everybody.
This has been a special presentation of Tony Kurre Radio.